I love One Piece. I love its world, its characters, its sense of humor, all of which are wonderfully realized in One Piece World Seeker. It's an original adventure that actually delivers a pretty solid story with interesting new characters written by Eiichiro Oda himself. The only problem is that in order to see that story, you have to play One Piece World Seeker, which is about 20 hours of boring, repetitive, and at times downright infuriating open world gameplay. Though it starts slow and the sheer volume of inconsequential side quests get in the way of the main plot, the overarching story is by far the best part of World Seeker. Prison Island is an interesting setting that I was happy to learn more about, and the two original characters, John and the Warden Isaac, wound up being the highlights as the story approached its climax and surprisingly emotional ending. It helps that it looks way better than it plays. And while it's not all voice acted, the big moments are told with beautifully rendered cutscenes featuring the Japanese voice cast. Unfortunately, while the story gets much better as it goes on, the actual gameplay of World Seeker does not. World Seeker is a formulaic open-world adventure, which means you'll spend a lot of time following waypoints, finding treasure chests that take an excruciatingly long time to open, and taking on tedious missions that either have you going to a spot, beating up a bunch of dudes, or collecting a bunch of meaningless sparklies. Combat in World Seeker is just as repetitive and boring as its mission design. The limited variety of enemies barely do anything that would require you to give any thought to how you would take them down whatsoever. For the most part, it didn't matter which of Luffy's two hockey stances I used, because I could just get up in their face and mindlessly mash the same button until everything was dead. There are a few enemies, like the shielded marines and robots, that required me to use my ranged attacks. But apart from that, almost every fight against regular enemies played out the exact same way. That got old within an hour, and there were 19 more to play. Sure, getting the bazooka skill and the armament stance gave me a way to deal huge damage to single targets, but ultimately all it did was make it so that instead of running into a fight pressing one button a bunch of times, I just ran into a fight holding one button for a few seconds. The issues in its combat and mission design go way beyond just repetition though. There are insta-fail stealth missions despite the fact that there are basically zero stealth mechanics, needle in a haystack missions where you must talk to virtually every NPC on the island, and the worst is a required treasure hunt mission with an extremely misleading map. World Seeker gets close to making navigating its large open world a joy with Spider-Man-like movement, but doesn't quite hit the mark here either. While Peter Parker has a whole assortment of moves designed to keep his momentum going despite just about any obstacle, Luffy's movement is much more stop and go. He can't run up walls. He only has one air dash that can only be used once he loses momentum. And while his UFO ability can extend his range, it feels sluggish and isn't super satisfying to use. Not to mention the fact that if you try to rocket around any heavily guarded city or base, snipers will just shoot you out of the sky, forcing you to take the long way around. Fortunately, there's a generous fast travel system. Perhaps the biggest shame about World Seeker is that One Piece's greatest strength is in its characters, and yet the rest of the crew are not much more than glorified NPCs. None of them are playable, so the entire burden of 20 plus hours of gameplay falls squarely on Luffy's rubbery shoulders. World Seeker looks the part of a breakout single-player One Piece game, but its many problems become apparent almost immediately after picking up the controller. Repetitive combat, cumbersome movement controls, and a few outstandingly bad missions get in the way of what otherwise would have been a very respectable One Piece story. Quite simply, One Piece deserves better. For more anime games, check out our reviews of Jump Force, Dragon Ball FighterZ, and for something completely different, check out my review for Devil May Cry 5. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.